Hello everyone, how's everyone doing? If you can hear me, you can write something in the chat. Actually, you can introduce yourself. Where are you logging from? Where did you hear about this live stream? And then we can get started. So go ahead in the YouTube chat. You can write something like where are you from? Where did you hear about it? Hopefully, you'll have access to all of that stuff. All right. Let's see. From X. I still call it Twitter, but okay. Yeah, Twitter. Hello. Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's been it's been so much time. We've been thinking about going to Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I never went there because there's so many cool things over there, like the Carlsbad Canyons, I think is over there. Then you have the White Sands National Park, um, but never got the time to visit Albuquerque, New Mexico, or New Mexico in general. I always wanted to go there. Montreal, Canada. Gabriel, hello. And then we have a question from Ozgun. Hi, SwiftUI predominantly estimated when it will completely take over. No, I don't know why they added a heart sign over here because it's kind of hard to see. Here we go. Over the sector. Well, so basically when everyone will go SwiftUI, I think if your app is UI kit because that is what we were using to create apps, then there's no real point of updating your app to SwiftUI, right? I mean, the screens and the pages that you have written, the controllers and all the stuff that you have written, if it's working, it's working. So there's no really need to to update it to SwiftUI. Now, you can create new screens in SwiftUI, and I think that should be the way for transitioning or moving forward. So let's say that if you want to design a setting screen, that's what usually people do, then do it in SwiftUI. All right. But I don't think SwiftUI will ever completely take over because all the apps that have already been written, they will always have the UI kit code. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think as we move forward, if you're creating a brand new app from scratch, then my recommendation would be to use SwiftUI because you can just code faster. All right. All right. So other people joining in, thank you for joining everyone. We have Key Stoke from India, Gagan Joshi from India, Bangalore or Bangalore. Okay. We have Hadi Razak from Houston. I'm also in Houston, Texas. Actually, the weather in Houston today is pretty decent. It's not insanely hot right now. It's actually pretty decent. All right. We have so if you're joining in, go ahead and introduce yourself and also talk about like where did you hear about this? Ask me anything. And before I go into the questions, let me see if I can introduce myself. Let me actually go to my blog, adamsharp.com. So my name is Mohammad Azam. I go with my last name, which is Azam, and I work for a coding boot camp where I teach web development, well, full stack web development, and I also teach AI machine learning in Python. Apart from that, I do, you know, iOS development on the side. I write articles, create videos on my YouTube channel as well as Udemy and my own website. So this is my own website, which is azamsharp.school. This is where I host all of my courses and workshops also. So you can see that right now I'm working on a brand new course. Actually, I just published an updated section for Superbase for iOS developers, but I have pretty much most of the courses that you can imagine in iOS. So the list just goes on and on. Apart from that, I also host workshops, and these are live workshops, 3 hour long, and these are very hands-on. So SwiftData is coming up. You have testing coming up, very important testing in October. And then Superbase workshop is also coming up, but I keep on adding different workshops also. All right. So this is a little bit about me. Let me go back over here. There we go. And let me go to your questions now. So the question from Michael Iverson is, what's more efficient, view controllers or SwiftUI in terms of app performance? So I think SwiftUI by default does use UI kit, because SwiftUI, when you're creating your views, that's not really the true views. You are simply declaring what you want. So behind the scene, if you're creating a list in SwiftUI, that will be using a collection view. If you're using some other control, let's say toggle might be toggle. Is it toggle? Yeah. See, toggle in SwiftUI might be mapping to something else in UI kit, like UI something, UI toggle or something like that, or picker might be you know managing to something else or linking to something else. In terms of performance, since it's using the same things, so SwiftUI, if used correctly, can give you the same performance. And I think that's what most people are not doing. They're not really using SwiftUI. They're just adding a lot of code, a lot of layers and layers of layers. And that's what causes some of the problems. And some of these problems were actually discussed. If I can see, I keep forgetting stuff. But some of these problems were discussed by um, what's that company? SoundCloud. Let me actually show you. SoundCloud, SwiftUI. Maybe we will get that session. Yeah, there we go. There's a really good session. Now, obviously, they were using completely different things. They were using like Viper with SwiftUI. So I highly recommend that you watch this talk. I'm just going to link it right there in the chat. And what they talked about is they use SwiftUI. They created layers and Viper and this and that, and they submitted their app on the App Store. And Apple said, "Whoa, your app is like 10 times slower than the competition. We cannot even accept your app. So go ahead and fix your app." And then they went back and they wrote the app the Apple way, and then it was like much faster. So definitely watch this also. It's a free video on Vimeo. I think it's from NS Spain or some conference, so it's available to you. All right. So hopefully that will help you out. All right. Then we have a question from Puma. How do you manage to learn so many things? Please give tips. Um, I think learning is just every day, 15, 30 minutes a day, you're just learning something new, right? And since I'm in the business of creating courses, I have to learn these things so I can teach them. So Superbase is something that I'm learning. After that, I might look into Vision Pro. I might look into Swift testing library. So if you even spend like maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes a day learning these things, it kind of adds up. And obviously, you know the saying that the best way to learn something is to teach something. So that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm in the business of creating these educational programming courses, so I have to learn this 30 minutes, 15, 30 minutes a day, just a little bit a day, reading documentation, trying it out, creating projects. That actually works for me. And I think if you're a beginner or junior developer, so one advice that I always give is work on a side project. Very important that you work on your side project, your pet project, your passion project. That is where you will really learn stuff. It can be about anything that you're passionate about. Maybe you're into fitness, maybe you're into cooking, maybe you're into traveling. Go ahead and create a cooking app or a fitness app or a health management app or a traveling app. Go ahead and you will learn so much by creating your side project. All right. You might start with, well, I need to get all the recipes. Where do I get recipes? Oh, I need to integrate with an API. There we go. We learn about API now, how to consume API. See that? How it kind of turns, oh, I need to be I need the recipes to be available when there is no internet connection. Well, maybe I can use on-device storage, core data, SwiftData, Realm. There we go. We start learning about SwiftData. We start learning about core data. So it kind of, when you create these real things, then you start learning about these. You really learn about these things. And the best way to learn is to just start building stuff. All right. Don't care about like, oh, which pattern should I use? Oh, this is like how many different layers? No, no, no. Just go ahead and build it. All right. You can always refactor the code. You can always go back and change the code. And if you're junior, you can always go back and modify. That's your first step should be to just start building your side projects. All right. Let's see. We have a question. I understand that, but for example, I want to make the camera side only with SwiftUI and get frames, but there is problem. UI kit is still very powerful, but SwiftUI is a good choice. Yeah, I think you can definitely do like, some pages of your app can be UI kit, some pages can be SwiftUI. I don't know about the video management, like if you're capturing something, how to get the frames and everything. Maybe you need to use a audio video controller or audio kit or something like that. You may have to use those things. But even with SwiftUI or UIKit, some of the views can be SwiftUI, some of the views can be UIKit. You can manage those things up. And I think it is UI view representable that you can use to expose those things into SwiftUI world. So you should be able to do that also. All right. Then we have a question from Gagan Joshi. It is, in SwiftUI, the other view gets initialized even if I haven't navigated to it after a button click. I don't like this behavior. Yes, so if other views are getting initialized, and let me actually see if I have VS Code. Don't worry about the code that I'm typing. It's not going to work. I'm writing it on VS Code, but at least it's going to give you some idea. All right. Now, first of all, this is a good question from Gagan, that even if you're not navigating to the view is getting initialized. Okay, fine. It's initialized, so what? That's my first question. So what? Right? If the view is initialized and you're not there, so what? It's not really going to affect that much of a performance. All right? Because initialization of the view is very different from rendering of the view. So the view is initialized, and if you know that the view itself is a struct, right? So it's basically a value type, and value types are very, very performance, like they are efficient. So even if it's initialized, it's basically kind of like initializing an integer value. So it's kind of like similar to that. But if you don't want to initialize a view because you haven't really went there, then the technique that you should be using is navigation destination. Let me actually show you if I can, if I have that approach. So somewhere in my article, and I have an article on navigation patterns, so you can check it out. It's called Navigation Patterns in SwiftUI. Oops, didn't paste it. There we go. Let's see. I think I talk about the same thing, right? So this is the first pattern. I think this is what you're saying. All right. If I use this pattern, and I use this pattern a lot, I haven't really gone to the customer details screen, but the customer details screen is already initialized. I don't really care that much if it's initialized or not, but if you do care about it, then you can use a different way of going to the screen, which is using navigation destination. And if you use your navigation destination, this one, the customer details screen will not be initialized unless you actually go there. So if you want, you can use this approach using navigation destination, and that will solve the problem. But I don't really see a problem to begin with. I mean, if even this view is initialized, I don't really care if it's initialized. It's initialized, not rendered. So initialize simply means the constructor initializer got fired. But then what? I mean, it's a struct. It doesn't really take anything. So it doesn't matter to me unless somebody's doing some crazy stuff in the initializer. Like if you're like, oh, let me go ahead and make a request to some API. So don't do that. Obviously, don't make a request in the initializer. That's going to mess everything up, obviously. All right. So these are the different approaches you can take. I think the one that you're looking for is the navigation destination approach. All right. So that will make sure that it is not initialized unless and until you actually go to customer detail screen. All right. And I think I talked about the same thing, which is this right there. I think I'm talking about the same thing. Keep in mind that the initializer of the customer details screen is called repeatedly for every single item in the list. It is recommended that you do not perform resource-intensive operations. Another option is this one, which is the one that I discussed. All right, so Michael is saying, so this is similar to Android Composer activities. I don't know, it's maybe a follow-up, so let's see what Michael said earlier. Yes, so SwiftUI is similar to, well, I don't really know about Compose, but it's similar to React, kind of similar to React. That's why I always kind of link React with SwiftUI. I think in React, if you're writing code, so this is React code. If I can, how do we write React code? Let's see. It's been a while, but here we go. So if I create a function called customer detail page or something, and I return in React UL and UL and something over here, item 1. I know it's like React code, by the way. That's not SwiftUI. So React does the same thing. It looks like this is a unordered list, but it's not. It's basically virtual DOM. And then eventually that thing will be mapped to HTML. So that is what the React is doing. And that is exactly what SwiftUI is doing for some of the controls. Like list over here is not a control. It is eventually going to be mapped to collection view. So that is something, the same thing going on. And the reason that they do that, at least React does that, is because this virtual DOM that they have is very powerful in keeping track of the state changes, and then it can emit and then eventually spit out HTML. All right. Okay, then we have a question from Gabriel Marquez. What are the best practices for securely storing API keys within an iOS app? I've heard about tools like Wireshark being able to intercept network traffic and potentially see them. Securely API keys. In API keys, when you're storing, I think you should be looking at something called environment. I think it's called environment. What is it called? ENV, environment variables. Environment variables. Now I'm not sure if this is available in. Let's see over here. Environment variables in Swift. Using environment. Maybe it's called something else, but I think it should be over here. Let's see. Environment variables. Usually you create a .env file. So is it creating a .env file over here? I think they call environment something else. I think, oh yeah, here we go. See that? I was just talking about the .env file. So they do, whenever you have keys, you put it in a .env file, and then you make sure that this file is not, it's in git ignore. It is in git ignore. So it's not pushed to GitHub, so nobody can see your keys. So that is how I do it in, I think, in Node.js or Express.js. You put the stuff in the .env file and then you simply refer to it in your code. I think this is what they're doing over here. They're doing it on the server side, which is Vapor. I think you can install it on the client side also if you're directly accessing it, obviously, um, depending on what you're doing. And if you're getting those tokens, like some sort of bearer tokens, you can store them in the keychain on the client side. But obviously, you're not asking for the tokens, you're asking for the API keys. API keys are, you can try to store it in the env file or something similar to that. So they're not pushed to GitHub because then everyone will see it. How do people find ideas for side projects? Well, I don't really work on apps. I work on courses, but if you're working on the apps, try to find something that fixes your problem that you're facing. And when you try to fix that, you'll be sure that other people are having the same issues. It can be as simple as, well, I want to go from point A to point B, Uber, Lyft, so these kind of things happen because somebody had the problem with cabs and taxis or whatever. So we form these things. Or maybe somebody had the need that, oh, I don't want to go for grocery shopping. Somebody can bring me my groceries. So we have TaskRabbit, we have Instacart. So find the problem that you're facing and then try to solve that problem. I think this is the best way to get to work on side projects and to get ideas for the side projects. And it doesn't have to be a brand new idea like never been done before. You can always learn from other and just make it better. You know, just because somebody has made an action movie doesn't mean that nobody else will be making action movies. Of course they do, right? I mean, every single week we see tons of action movies being released, but they're different. So, so use that approach, I would say. You have alluded to more mature framework that is React and hooks. Yes. So what is your thinking on native SwiftUI versus Flutter? Native SwiftUI both have, I think both have the presence in our community and both are very important. I know that I am mostly doing SwiftUI or native, but I have no dislike for React Native or Flutter because these projects can also help companies who are creating apps not for the purpose of selling other people something, or their apps are not really the way to get the money, but it might be just used as a way or a medium to expose their services. I'm in Houston, Texas. There is not much native development going on, and this has been the same for since 2010 or even before that. So it's been like, let's say, 12 plus years. There's not much native development. We don't even have a iOS group over here. I mean, we do, but nobody meets there. It's been like 6 years, all right? So 6 to 7 years, nobody meets over here. Um, the reason is in Houston, where I live, most of the companies are oil and gas and like big, giant, slow-moving companies, and they don't really want to invest the time to create one code base for Android and one code base for iOS native, one code base for Android native, because most of the apps that they're designing are for their internal employees, and they have obviously these oil companies have like thousands of employees. So, and they already have developers that are doing .NET. So their first choice is, well, why don't we just use Xamarin? Why don't we just use React Native or Sencha, PhoneGap? Yeah, I know those, some of them are horrible, but that's their business decision. They have no interest in creating good looking apps because it will be used by their own people, their own internal employees. I mean, I work with a lot of apps in Houston and they look so bad. I mean, even when I was looking at the app, I was like, oh my God, they're going to be using this. And they are, they do use that. Like there was an app for I think it was for truck drivers. So they have to take breaks after driving certain amount of time, and they have to log all of that stuff. And it was horrible. I mean, it looked absolutely hideous. But they were using it. It was an internal app by internal truck drivers. So I think you will always find need for native apps, but you will also find need for non-native apps written in React Native and Flutter for companies that are not interested in pushing it to the App Store, or they are not interested. This is not like their means of revenue. So it's perfectly fine to do that. It's a business decision. Whether we as developers like it or not, it is in the end a business decision. All right. What are the most common security mistakes iOS developer make, and how can we avoid them? I'm not sure what the common mistakes are, but I think the biggest security stuff that I've seen is not hashing the passwords and putting it in the database. So those things can have a very bad effect, because in the end, most people use the same password for everything. So if you get the password for your app, probably they're using the same exact password for their bank account, their credit card, their debit card, and so on. So making sure that the password is long, making sure that the password is hashed, it will give you a little bit more you know sense, I guess, or more security. Um, I think that's the biggest one. Let's see over here. In the topic of SwiftUI navigation, it's getting better, but even with the navigation stack, it is a hell to manage with big apps, 20 plus screen, non-linear nav. What are your in what are your thoughts about large apps navigation? I think in this article that I wrote for large navigation or navigation for bigger apps, one of the sections that I added is this one, tab view navigation using hooks. Now it's not like you have to use a tab view, but this is how I would do it if I'm working on a very large app with different tabs. Obviously, tab is just an example, but with large app working with different tabs, each tab will go to some place. You can always create these hierarchies. Let me actually see if I can find that. Patient route. You'll have to go through this article, because in this I've covered a couple of different things. Uh, Let me actually just show you the end result over here. If you're working with tabs, and maybe you're not working with tabs, let's just say that you are, but you can see that patient navigation stack will be the patient tab will be controlled by patient navigation stack, and all the routes will go over here. So this will control all the routing. And in the end, and the doctor navigation will be doctors. So let's say that you have another tab called doctors. So this will be controlled by that. And in the end, it will look like this. I think it looks really nice because it's inspired by React. See that? So this, and you can even nest it out. You see that patient, you're not going to simply patient, but you're saying that, oh, I want to go to the patient and I want to go to the list of patients. So this is how you can kind of like organize your routes. Obviously, somewhere in this article, I mentioned what patient and all that stuff is, but you can nest different things. Uh, I think somewhere I'd created patient and all that stuff. Let's see over here. There we go. So this is the route that I'm creating. This is like nesting routes. And for large application, maybe this can benefit you. All right. So maybe some of the techniques I discussed in this article, maybe you'll find it helpful. All right, then we have Michael is asking, I use your course on Udemy for navigation SwiftUI. I like the use of navigation stack. What's the navigation? Is navigation stack the way to go for future iOS development? Yes. Navigation stack, I guess it was introduced in iOS 16. And if you are building iOS app right now in SwiftUI, you should be using navigation stack. I would start all of these things small. Like, you don't have to create enums and all this crazy amount of routing. Just keep it basic. And when the complexity arises, then you can add those things together. And these all things that I've put over here in this article, this is all just inspired from other frameworks like React, right? Right over here, you can see this is basically, if you have done React, there is a hook called use navigate. So my end goal was to just reach this kind of a nice and simple to use API. And this kind of works. But obviously, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that I have to implement to get it to work. So this may or may not be suitable for small apps. I mean, small apps, it will be a killer. I mean killer means it's over complexity. So you shouldn't probably be doing it for your complexity for that. All right. We have a question from Perma. I'll go back to other ones, I guess. Please tell us about your pro membership monthly and yearly, and will the workshops are free? Pro membership for my website, which is over here, right here. So I just added this new thing for annual membership. So if you have annual membership, you get the free live workshop, which is, I think, kind of like a great deal. For monthly members, if you're a monthly member and you want to get access to the workshop, you just contact me, or you should already have the code. If you signed in, it shows you the code, or it gives you the code, and then you can sign in for the workshop. You get 50% off. So that's the only difference between the monthly and the annual. All right. All right, going back to the question from Raphael Egli. It is, I work on a Vapor and iPad project. This works all very well thanks to your course, but now I need to implement online offline sync. How would you go strategy to do that? Online offline sync. I have not done online offline sync, but it looks like that this will be part of some sort of a chat application. And if it is part of a chat application, then can we do sockets in Vapor? So if it is a part of web application, if it's a part of a chat application, then I would probably start looking at WebSockets, because WebSockets will allow you to, instead of creating like a request, like multiple requests, you simply subscribe to a particular channel, and once somebody goes to that channel or subscribes to that channel, like a room for golf or a room for tennis, then they will automatically get notification if somebody sends messages to that channel. And I think whenever you go and subscribe to the channel is kind of like a room. So you also get a notification that it is that the person has joined. All right. So hopefully that will help. Nalesh has a question. I'm using SwiftData. My question is, when I have nested array and I'm trying to modify it with an edit screen by passing in the parent model, I have noticed that persisting a sheet does not persist data consistently. But when I have the same code with using navigation link and destination, the data does work. Have you experienced a difference between presenting a sheet versus navigation link to update the data? I have not seen that. I did encounter some other issues with the sheet, but nothing related to using a navigation link to update the data in SwiftData. A navigation link is for navigation. So if you're presenting a sheet, if you're updating SwiftData, instead of navigation link, if you can try using a button to update, presenting a sheet while this. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I've used navigation link for presenting a sheet. Usually I just use like a normal button. It changes the state, and when the state is changed, it obviously presents the sheet. All right. Gabriel is asking, how important is knowledge of backend technologies and APIs for a junior iOS developer? I think backend is extremely important. I don't know how important it is for junior developer, but I think they all should be learning backend development. Very, very important. I mean, you can rely on Firebase, you can rely on, what is that called, Superbase, but they will get you somewhere, right? I mean, and once you cross that threshold, they will also become very expensive. But if you know your backend, or if you can create your own backend, which I know it's a big ask to create your own backend, then it will save you money down the road because hosting a backend is like very cheap. And you will have that knowledge of creating your own backend. So you will have the flexibility to do whatever you want to do. I mean, if you want to use MongoDB, you can use MongoDB. If you want to use Postgres, you can use Postgres. You can create different routes. You can expose your own API that people can subscribe to. So you will have way more control when you are creating your own backend. Now, as a Swift and iOS developer, this poses a problem because where should we start, and like where do we even learn backend? You can always start with Vapor. Vapor is a framework which is for iOS developer, written in Swift, uh, for Swift, and you can use that. So you are not going to be leaving your world of uh, iOS development or Swift. You can see it's all Swift, so you can definitely use that. That's pretty cool. You can, and they have a very good community on Discord. They have very good documentation. I have some courses over here also if you're interested. I think my course is somewhere. It's called Full Stack Development, this one. All right. And other things, Express.js, I mean, this is in JS, meaning this is JavaScript. So I use that. That is my go-to framework. The reason is that I teach that, so I'm more familiar with it. So that's why I use this. All right. So yes, but I think if you're comfortable with SwiftUI and you can create basic apps, then your next step would be to start learning the backend development. It is extremely important. And here's the best part. Once you learn one framework, whether it is Vapor or whether it is Express, you can you can just one framework, once you learn it, then the other framework just becomes easier. Not that you're jumping into other frameworks, but you can if you want to. So back in the day, I learned about ASP.NET MVC, and I think you can create web APIs. And that helped me to learn Express, that helped me to learn Vapor, that helped me to learn Kitura from IBM. And also I was able to build something simple in Flask in Python. So all of them are very similar in the end. All right. So that's always good to learn something once and then apply it in many different things. Shivin, Shivansh Kumar is saying SwiftUI declarative framework is future for app user interface. Do you think a few years UI kit will be obsolete? I don't know if it will be obsolete. I mean, I think it will be used less and less, especially in the new applications. But if you're working for a company that has been creating software for, 5 or 10 or years, or working on the app or whatever their system is, they don't really need to go and update everything. They can just integrate SwiftUI, and maybe the new screens, the new views that you're building, new features, maybe those should be in SwiftUI rather than, okay, let's rewrite the app. There's no need to rewrite anything. If it's working, it's working. All right. Okay, let's see. Declared framework. What is the future of UI kit? I think it's the same answer I would say. Is it true that it takes 2 years to learn Metal? I have no idea. I have never really used Metal. How to use CI/CD? Which tool is best to learn for interviews and development? There's so many tools for CI/CD because now you can even do what is that, Xcode Cloud. But it depends on the company that what they're using for CI/CD tools. I None of the names are coming up in my mind right now, but I think a lot of tools are designed for iOS apps. You will just have to search like CI/CD tools, CI/CD tools for iOS tools for iOS. Team City, okay, there we go. Team City is very popular actually. And the last time I checked, it was pretty simple to set up. You have Runway. Runway is another one. Bitrise, Code Magic. I mean, it just goes on and on. I think these are the big ones. Team City, but it depends. Every company will be using their own system, so you can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to learn Team City and everyone will be using Team City." No, people will be using different things. People will be using, maybe they'll using like Runway. They'll use something else. All right. In response to my earlier question, I was trying to ask persisting data in Swift data using presenting sheet and dismissing versus navigation link and going back. Well, if you're saving data, let me actually see if I have access to something. So what I would do is, let's say that if we have just to give you an example, if I have add customer screen, if this is your sheet, right? Obviously none of this code will work because I'm actually using VS Code, just to give you an outline. So if this is your stuff, whatever you're doing, save to Swift data, add the code to save to Swift data. Maybe over here you have access to something like, what is that called? The model context, private var, context. There we go. And then you will say customer. You will create a customer with a name, which you are getting from a text box, obviously. And then you will say context.insert model. I'm just making all of this stuff up. Here we go. And then you'll just say dismiss, and that's it. You're done. So if this is your model, if this is your actual screen, you can just, why don't we just call dismiss? After you insert, after you call the button, it adds the actual customer into the context and it saves automatically, and then you dismiss it, and then this sheet, this modal, is going to dismiss, and you're done. So you don't really have to do anything else. That should be, that should be simple as that. All right. Now, if your question is, well, what about the other screen? How will that get refreshed, right? Because now you have added a customer, so how will my other view is going to get refreshed? So other view, if this is your customer list screen with body and whatever, the body and everything, well, use a query. It will automatically get refreshed, and whatever the query is doing. So this is customers. And there we go. Automatically, that's the beauty of using query macro, because the query macro is going to automatically, it's going to say, oh, something actually got changed and I need to re-render the body again. All right. So that is how I would do it, and that is how it will work. And you're saying, but when I kill the app, the deleted info comes back. Then there's something wrong with the delete that you're doing. I mean, if you're deleting or adding, it shouldn't come back. Obviously, I'm inserting over here, but if you simply say delete model or delete something, then it should be just deleted from the Swift data. And you should be able to find some stuff. If you just search for SwiftData Azam Sharp on YouTube, you should be able to find a lot of different videos which covers this part. So you should be able to find something over there. Let's see. What is integration testing? How it is different from XC test framework? Well, integration testing is you're just testing different things, integrating with different things. So a good idea to test is if you have controllers and it is hooking up with a web service or some sort of HTTP client, then you can perform that testing. That will be called integration. When you test two different systems together, that will be the integration testing. And if you're testing with, or if you're hooking up with Stripe API to perform online payments, and if you want to test it out how it performs with your app or your code that you have written, so that will be integration testing also. All right. How can we avoid API calling every time when the view appear in SwiftUI? So don't do API calling in the view appear. Do it on the task right over here. Call the API. So that is one of the things that you can do is you can call, you can use a task modifier and you can call the API over here. The other technique would be that when you're calling that, you should have to cache that response and cache that URL with the response, obviously. And if that response or URL is already cached, then don't go there. Just get it from the response. All right, you get it from the cache response. So that is something that you'll have to build yourself. Although URL cache, I think they talk about that URL cache caches the response, but it depends the size of the memory that you have and where it is caching. So all of those different things. But you can check on those things. But task, so don't do it in on appear, do it in on task. So that can be one thing. All right. Anyone know how I can fade in? I don't know the answer to the full covered screen. That's something to do with transition maybe. Please show the use of the face change feature. I have not used face change feature. So if somebody has used face change feature, you can let me know. And let's see other question. How important do you think lead code is to get a job in this field? Well, yeah, lead code, which is basically algorithm questions, these are getting asked from any FANG company that you join. Like if you're joining Facebook or Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're always going to give you these kind of questions like algorithm questions. So in order to pass the interview, you need to know algorithm questions. Without that, it will become hard to get into that first step. One of the great books for that is, I think it's called Cracking the Coding Interview book. So this is a great book for algorithm questions and obviously, the interview, cracking the coding interview, like getting good with coding interview, 189 programming questions. Let me see if I can share the link. But once you are sitting at your work and once you're creating apps, the algorithm questions, they don't really matter that much because we're not really sitting there and writing or inverting a binary tree, or we're not really doing, bubble sort. Well, bubble sort is horrible, but quick sort and selection sort, we're not really writing those things. We're just trying to get the work done and use the API to get the work done, like whatever the framework that you're using. So, but it is important for the first step, which is to get you the interview and pass the interview. So this can be a really good book for that. All right. Async versus completion handlers difference. Well, async completion handler difference. Async, obviously, what it does is, I think it was introduced a number of years ago when we introduced like async and await in Swift, which kind of not really would perform the task separately, and when it comes back, it can kind of like resume the work. With completion handlers, you can do the same thing, but the only problem with completion handlers can be it requires a little bit more code, and also not like more, apart from more code, you can sometimes forget to return stuff. Like there, you have to put like return statements everywhere, and sometimes you forget to do that. They are basically performing, or they are working the same kind of like the same way. But if I have a choice, I would use async versus completion handlers because it's less code, it's more performant efficient because it is async is basically saying that this is just going to be like one thing doing the work, and you cannot really run into those uh, the race conditions because everything else is just awaiting for that response. So in those cases, and you can also group them together in the async and await. You can wait for certain tasks to finish and then get the result and then supply to the second one. I think it's using async let. So you can do a lot more with async. So I would move to async await and not completion handlers if I have a choice. All right. How to handle 10 lakh at a time, move to core data. Uh, you will probably have to do some sort of a batching in that, and you'll have to come up with a number that don't do 10 lakh or 100,000 rows at the same time, but you will do 500 rows at the same time, or you will do maybe in core data. I think core data does have something called bulk insert core data. Maybe you will have to take advantage of that. Batch insert, sorry, not bulk, batch insert. So something with the batch insert. I have not worked with batch insert, but that's what it is for. All right. Okay. Combine, I don't really use combine at that much anyways. Or like with the async and await, I just find combine to be a little bit more hassle to use. And we can also see that Apple is not really investing that much time in Combine framework. I mean, there are no new sessions for Combine in the last couple of WWDC. There might be some situation where you actually use Combine, but most of the time I don't really use Combine framework at all. Do you have a tutorial to display the camera in a SwiftUI view? Yes, I do have the tutorial. I'll have to find it. Let's see. Sharp camera SwiftUI. The complete guide for integrating camera. This is definitely very old, but yeah, this one is a little bit old, 4 years old, so it's pretty old. But I think I've used the same approaches. But you can definitely check this out. I don't know if they have. I know that for the photo library they made it easier, but for camera you still have to code like a bit of. You have to write a lot of code to make it work. So there's a link that you can definitely check it out. What are the top cities in the US for junior iOS developer to find the entry level position, and what makes the city stand out? I think for technology oriented jobs and where you're living on the cutting edge and these kind of cool jobs, obviously Silicon Valley, any probably San Jose area, San Francisco, obviously where all the startups are, they're always going to be looking for developers. So, so all these metro areas, New York can be really good, maybe even Seattle area. I wouldn't, maybe Austin. I mean, from Texas, I would choose Austin, but I'm not sure what kind of work is being done in Austin. But I'm sure it's way more advanced than where I am in Houston. So there's a lot of, so I would choose, yeah, obviously California, a lot of startups are over there. Austin is also like a mini San Francisco. And then New York, Seattle, all of these places are very expensive to live, as you can imagine. But I think those are the top cities for native iOS development. When I was teaching iOS boot camp, and it was like 5, 6 years ago, one of my students graduated and he was in Houston. So he graduated, he couldn't find anything over here in Houston because there was no jobs for native iOS developers in Houston, so he couldn't find anything. He went to San Francisco. 10 days he found a job. All right. And as an iOS developer, 10 days. Only in 10 days he found a job. So that's kind of crazy because there's so much going on in San Francisco. I got a H-1B visa and I'm a native iOS developer. What are the skills I need to upgrade to get a job? Well, I don't think your biggest issue will be your skills. as a H1B person, your biggest issue is H1B itself. It's just very hard to get a job. Somebody else to, you already have sponsored, so they will have to transfer the H1B visa. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but H1B, they usually, it just, the visa itself makes it so hard for other people to, you know, uh, other companies to just, to hire H1B people. I don't want to discourage anyone, but that is at least what I felt when I was also on H1B long, long, long time ago. All right. So it's, yeah, I'm not sure how I can even answer the H1B visa question. I mean, it's going to be much harder to find a job, and then you will have that whole migration path to U.S. citizen, but it's definitely very hard, no question about it. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That's a lot of questions, and hopefully you have enjoyed it. Let's see over here, cracking the coding interview and everything. The, Finally, this is where I post most of my courses, Adam Sharp School, adamsharp.school. And I am currently working on Superbase course. I actually just published a small update, which is on, what is this called? The many to many. So you can see all of these things are being covered over here. There we go. So definitely you can check it out if you're looking into Superbase. For architecture, I actually do have a course on architecture, which is right here. This is a Swift UI architecture. So I created this course also. I don't think you need this word for clean architecture. It's very misleading um, because it talks about creating layers and layers and layers. Those things don't really work with these modern frameworks like Flutter and React and SwiftUI. You don't create repository, you don't create controllers and this layers and 10,000 other layers. You just get the work done. You just use your views as a container, and yes, you can add those. Some people add view models. I usually call them stores. You can create those stores which will provide the data to the view and be done with it. You don't have to create like 30 different layers and pass the data to make it more complicated. All right, so clean architecture, if you read the book, it may work on different apps, maybe, but with these modern frameworks that we're looking at now, which is, SwiftUI, React, Flutter, those kind of architectures and those layers are just non-existing now. We don't really use that. There's a really good documentary. Let me see if I can find that. There's a really good documentary on React. It's from Facebook, so React.js documentary. I know it's not SwiftUI, but it will be very similar. So definitely check this out. How what goes behind the scene, what goes in their mind when they created React. So you'll definitely enjoy that documentary. All right, everyone. So that is pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining. There's a lot of questions, and there are a lot of people joined today. Hopefully, you have enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, and you can also follow me on Twitter. I am on Twitter or X at Azam Sharp. That is my Twitter. You can check out my website for the school, which is azamsharp.school. That is my website, and my blog is azamsharp.com, where you can find all of my articles. I don't really write that much, but when I write, I try to write a little bit more detailed articles, so you should be able to get that. And I think my YouTube is basically youtube.com/azamsharp. So I will be working on some videos that will be available either this week or next week about navigation and also communication navigation, basically navigation and communication with the API, JSON API. So I'll be working on that. All right. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate it, and hopefully it has helped your questions. So thank you. And we'll do that next time. Hopefully next week we'll be able to get some time and we can do it for 1 hour. But once again, thank you, everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.